Hi guys, welcome back. I'm continuing the reading of There's Something You Should Know About Leroy, and I'm at chapter 3. Alright, so chapter 3. Poor little child, so innocent, lamented Maud as she sipped her coffee. She had to have 2 cups of coffee every morning, jet black, no cream or condensed milk. She shook her head. Looked like her father beating the daylight out of her, so she run away. We have to put her up for a little while, Prue, till at least him calm down. Girl child, 16-year-old shouldn't be getting no beating, and such a pleasant girl. What he beat her for? Asked Prudence. It was Saturday morning, and she was dusting the living room, with her guitar strung across her. Maud never could understand how someone could do housework while playing the guitar. That man is an old drunkard. Don't need no reason to beat nobody. Maud shook her head. Prudence was the youngest of her daughters, at 23 years old. She had 3 daughters, Daphne, Primrose, and Prudence. Maud's philosophy was, when her menses start, you don't beat a young girl anymore. Daphne was 26. Her father, Gussie, had been on the farm work program and had run off to New York donkey years ago. Maud had never heard from him once since. Now Daphne was pregnant and planning to move out. Primrose, a year younger than Daphne, had witnessed her father, Bobby, being shot when she was 8, a robbery gone bad, in Jonestown where they used to live. Prim had watched him heave and holler as the blood drained from his body. She was now at community college. The twins, Freddie and Ferdy, were 12 years old and preparing for exams. Stubbs was in his wheelchair on the veranda, helping Ferdy with homework. The twins' names was a ticklish point with Stubbs. They were identical twins. You two already look almost exactly alike. Why your mother gonna name you almost the exact same thing? He would ask. Only make matters worse. At first, he had a hard time telling them apart, and whenever he wanted one of them to go run an errand or something, he just called a name, and whoever turned up was fine by him. But within the past year, it was getting clearer and clearer who was whom. There were clues. Ferdy had emerged as the bright one who loved to cook and could hold his own in debates when Stubbs and Indian were ironing out the affairs of the world. Indian was Stubbs' sidekick. Freddie was the smutty one who cared nothing for books and would cock his ears whenever big people argument was being discussed. Owing to his frequent escapades in the kitchen, Ferdy had gained the edge in weight and height. If one of them was seen watching television, reading clandestine material, or stealing something from the pot, 9 out of 10 times it was Freddie. The twins' father, who was Prudence's father as well, was Benjamin. He was now in prison for killing his brother Alfred, who had started an argument with Maud when she was pregnant with the twins. So owing to sheer bad luck and a bit of chivalry, Maud had raised her 5 children all by herself. She worked as a helper in a posh house in Norbrook. On the side, she sold cigarettes, phone cards, and laundry detergent from a little stall set up on Stubbs' veranda, a practice that was frowned upon by the authorities. Anyone passing by her house would say, "Oh, Maud lives in a wonderful house." And she did keep it that way. The outside walls always remained brightly painted and immaculately clean. Maud tended a garden out front in the swale with hibiscus, croton, roses, and other gorgeous flowers, which she pampered and brooded over like neonates in intensive care. She had planted a hedge of ficus trees, which were pruned to perfection, all the while careful that the roots didn't get to the wall or the house and wreak havoc. Ficus trees were mad like that if you made them get out of hand. But if you befriended them and watered them religiously to keep the tiny black insects to a minimum, they repaired you with a thick, bountiful hedge that was the envy of your neighbors. So passers-by were impressed, but they were misled about one thing. This was not Maud's house. This house belonged to Stubbs. Maud had never owned a house in her life. She and Benjamin had been working towards getting a mortgage, up to that fateful day when her brother-in-law sought to insult her, an insult which robbed him of his life and her of a husband and the dream of owning her own home. At 44 years old, she now lived in a sprawling 3-bedroom house which she could not afford. She struggled to keep the light and water on from month to month, let alone pay the rent and keep food on the table. Prim and Daphne shared one of the bedrooms. Maud partitioned her own large bedroom into 2 smaller ones so that she could have one section while the twins shared the other. Prudence had to have her own room. Maud always insisted on this. Everyone said Prudence was her favorite. In spite of the everlasting amount of rent owed to him, Stubbs would never think of putting Maud out. He had come to think of them as his own family. He himself was content to live in the quad, to which he retreated every night to take his insulin shots and remember the wife that he had lost. He no longer resented the loss of his 2 legs, amputated all the way to his upper thighs due to the threat of gangrene. The fate of the diabetic. He had long resigned himself to the particular fate of having half a body confined for life to a wheelchair, while others bobbed around on 2 strong legs that took them wherever they wanted to go. He was once like them. He was grateful for the memories. There were trade-offs. His upper body was thick and muscular from wheeling himself around all day. His pride, having been taken down a few notches, was now in the right place. He learned to depend on himself, but also to humbly depend on others. Certain humiliations were things of the past. He could ask for help. He could also lend a hand. At 62, he was a self-made man who owned several pieces of real estate for which he was landlord. Though he lived modestly in the quad, he had air conditioning, solar water heater, and was toying with the idea of installing a full solar generator to bypass the common electricity grid altogether. Not bad for a double amputee. What are we tackling today? Fractions? Asked Stubbs. Ferdy opened his notebook, his homework book. No, algebra. Algebra? Stubbs scratched his head. Been a while since I did any algebra. They want us to find x, explained Ferdy. X? The unknown, we have to find what it is. Stubbs paused for a while, scratching his head. What else we got? Just algebra and some spelling. Okay, back out the spelling book, Stubbs said, rubbing his hands together. This was his forte. Prudence shook her head. Stubbs and Ferdy in their normal Saturday morning duel with homework. Where's Freddy? Don't he have homework too? Asked Maud absently. She figured Freddy was still asleep, which he was. That boy needs a father, Maud noted to herself. At least Stubbs was a father figure to Ferdy, who had latched on to the old man like a puppy from day one. Freddy, on the other hand, avoided all interaction with Stubbs. He preferred to hang around the wayward youth who loitered around the bar at the end of the pathway, smoking and drinking and making snide remarks at the girls who passed. Maud was on her second cup of coffee. Prudence had finished dusting and was standing in the middle of the room, fiddling with the strings of her guitar. "Child, put down that guitar a little bit. It's like the two of you born together," teased Maud. It was a joke she always made. A hell of a time Prudence had given her coming out, just as cheap it had been her and the guitar. Prudence was pretending she was on stage. It was a Saturday night in the middle of summer. Tokyo. The crowd was huge and in a frenzy. The lights were dazzling. Amid the screams and chaos of the throng, Prudence could hardly make out the words of adoration, but she could easily guess what they were. She slowly raised her right hand, signaling for them to be quiet. She was about to begin. She closed her eyes and sang as she played. Everyone listened, enthralled. Suddenly, there was the sound of sirens. An ambulance, maybe? Perhaps someone in the audience had fainted. It had happened many times before. "Sound like Constable making his rounds," said Stubbs. He was referring to Inspector Lloyd. Stubbs always called him Constable, to irritate him. Inspector Lloyd took his job very seriously. He liked to be on top of things. In the fight against crime in Portmore, he was at the vanguard. A wave of crime had hit the town lately, linked to high youth unemployment and delinquency. Young men had taken to drugs, liquor, and gambling. Inspector Lloyd made regular rounds to scoop them up. "We're watching this 3 West area very keenly. Keep your eyes open for me, Stubby," he would often say to Stubbs, who was the president of the Citizens Association. "Speak of the devil," said Stubbs. "Morning, Constable. You're on the beat early, man." Inspector Lloyd let himself onto the veranda, gave out a hearty round of howdy-doos to one and all, pulled up a chair beside Stubbs, and leaned in for a conference. Ferdy excused himself. "We found 2 guns yesterday on 74 Way, whispered Inspector Lloyd. Maud cocked her ears. What she couldn't hear outright, Stubbs would fill her in on later. Cheyenne walked into the living room, yawning and stretching. "Just wake, eh, Putus?" said Ma. Putus was a name she gave to anyone whom she felt was vulnerable, like a little kitten or a toddler. "Yes, Auntie," whispered Cheyenne. "Morning." She was still in her nightgown. Inspector Lloyd, always alert to any changes in his environment, peeped in at the young girl who had gone to sit beside Maud. "Who this little young one, Miss Maud?" asked the inspector. "Haven't seen her face before." "It's Cheyenne. I grow her from she's small, but she live in Pitford, Montego Bay. Not related, but I grow her," Ma explained. "Went to school with her mother, God rest her soul." "Oh," replied the inspector. "Good, good." It was a favorite expression of his, even when things weren't at all good. It was a way of maintaining his poker face, a very necessary skill in his line of work. "Hello, Cheyenne, you said?" "Yes, sir, Cheyenne," the young girl replied, bashfully. "Nickname," said the inspector. Shy. Cheyenne, you're a shy little one, but don't be shy." He had also perfected his skill at gaining the confidence of the young ones. He prided himself on this. "It's what I'm saying," the inspector returned to Stubbs. "We have to keep the scheme safe for innocent young girls like these. How old you said you was?" turning back to Cheyenne. 16, sir." My, 16, the peak of innocence. "I have 3 daughters," reflected the officer. "Big women now, but I remember when they were 16. Sweet little things." These teenage boys walked by on the pathways, raising the hair at the back. 3 teenage boys walked by on the pathway, raising the hair at the back of the inspector's head. His senses were fine-tuned. 34 years in the force, nothing got by him. He raised his eyebrows as the boys passed meekly. Morning, officer, they chirped, a bit surprised to see him on the veranda. Indeed, indeed, he responded suspiciously. You never know what these boys were up to. Idleness, the devil would find work. You know what else is on the rise? He leaned back closer to Stubbs, who was always eager to know what was on the rise. Car theft is like 2 or 3 cars stolen every week in 3 West alone, mostly Corolla and Nissan. True, agreed Stubbs. Many citizens been complaining at the meetings. You need to come by next Sunday, you know, Constable. Give them some tips on how to keep their vehicles safe. Will do. Camaraderie was at fever pitch. And I'll take Sergeant Dakers along to give the women some tips on how to avoid being the victims of rape. It's rampant, you know, Stubbs, especially in the 14 to 15 brackets. He suddenly remembered that Cheyenne was listening. Don't be scared, little one. The police is here to protect you. Cheyenne smiled. Listen, Stubbs, I'm going to run along and catch up with these scoundrels. With those scoundrels. See what they're up to. I smell mischief. Keep me posted and I'll do the same. Roger that, said Stubbs. Cheyenne, that's what Constable called you, Ma chuckled. She looked with love at the little girl, whom she had grown since she was 8 months old after the death of her mother. A puny little preemie who grew petite in spite of the cornmeal porridge and mashed potatoes with margarine that Maud stuffed her with. When the child was 8 years old, her father had come to claim her out of the blue and had taken her to Montego Bay to live with him. She had returned to spend 2 summer holidays with Maud, but hadn't been in touch in 6 years. Yesterday, the girl turned up at Maud's gate with tears in her eyes. I need somewhere to stay, Auntie Maud. Daddy been beating me really bad. I can't take it anymore. You grow though, Ma said now, looking at her. Still skinny, like Papa Tree, but you grow. Prue, get some breakfast for Cheyenne. Poor little thing, probably starving. For Maud, almost everybody was a poor little thing. Prue, you must take her up to Helshaw with you when you guys go in today, Ma suggested. Cheer her up a bit. You wanna come to the beach, Cheyenne asked Prudence. She hadn't seen Cheyenne in so long. The girls had grown like cousins. Now Cheyenne was on the verge of womanhood. Me and my friends go up to the beach almost every Saturday. Not now though, in the afternoon. Sure, said Cheyenne. Can you swim? Not really. I try not to go past where the water is at my ankle. You still playing your guitar, Prudence? She and that guitar are born together, chuckled Ma. The 2 of them give me hell coming out. End of chapter 3. Alright, chapter 4. What we cooking today? Some good old saltfish fritters? Asked Stubbs. His belly had been reminding him that it was near lunchtime. He was consulting with Chief Ferdy to see what was on the menu for today. Saltfish fritters. We do that all the time, murmured Ferdy. Let's try something new. Stubbs nodded. The best chefs like to try new things. What do you have in mind then? Ferdy fetched the cookbook and opened to page 32. Omelette, he said. Who? Asked Stubbs. Omelette. We're gonna need some cheese and eggs. Stubbs was as adventurous as the next man, but this omelette thing sounded suspicious. Let me see, he said. Ferdy handed him the cookbook. The picture looked promising. Okay, Stubbs relented. He had had his mind set on saltfish fritters, but a man must at times seek to broaden his horizons. Here, go buy the cheese and eggs. He gave Ferdy $50. The chef scampered off. Stubbs was not always in accord with Ferdy's method of cooking. Ferdy was the most scornful chef ever. Stubbs ate his sardines whole, guts, bones, and everything. Ferdy had to remove the guts and bones, and he was always finding worms in the sardine. Live and let live, Stubbs would say. Fish have worms, get over it. The first time Ferdy fried up some sardines, the degutting process was so thorough that there was more sardine in the bin than in the pot. Stubbs nearly had a fit. But he was pleased with how Ferdy had been progressing, and his own palate had been expanding. Ferdy wanted to be a professional chef. Stubbs was doing whatever he could to encourage this. The omelets were prepared and served. Stubbs was glad he had had the courage to try something new. He liked omelets. He was pleased. Prudence didn't mind having Cheyenne to help out with the Saturday morning chores. There was no electricity, so the washing machine could not be used. They had to hand wash the laundry using the 2 concrete wash tubs, scrubbing with the washing brush, rinsing and wringing all by hand. There would be no ironing this weekend. She'd have to select some of her ready-to-wear clothes. She couldn't vacuum either. It was always a sticky situation each time the electricity was disconnected. Prudence avoided Stubbs' eyes, though she knew there was no condescension there. He was his usual pleasant self, as if nothing was wrong with the world, as if he wasn't baking in the quad with no fan to cool him or chase away the mosquitoes. At night, Prudence heard him fanning himself with the folded newspaper. He kept it up all night. He never complained. "What we gonna do about the light?" Prudence asked Maud. "Stubbs said he'll pay it Monday," Maud replied. "The company don't reconnect over the weekend. We have to bear through till Monday." Prudence didn't want to chastise her mother about neglecting to pay the bill. She knew that Maud tried to make ends meet. She just didn't earn enough, running such a huge household on her meager salary. The selling she did on the side was unpredictable and unreliable. Most of her customers wanted credit and took forever to pay. In any case, it was just a small stall with a handful of goods. "One day, I'll buy you a house so big, you'll get lost in it, and you'll have to call search and rescue to come find you in it." And she often said to Maud, "And we'll have solar generators. The lights will never go out." She was talking about when she became a famous guitarist. Sometimes she would take Maud with her on tour and show her the sights, the interesting places of the world. She would take Maud shopping, or she could pick out all the nice clothes for Ferdy and Freddie and Prim and Daphne's baby, who by then would be a toddler. The only bathrooms that Maud would clean would be her own, and only if she wanted to. "I wouldn't really want a mansion as such," Maud would say, hitching a ride on the dreams. She was prone to a bit of fancy herself. "Just big enough to make me comfortable. If it's too big, I'm gonna be scared and get lonely." "Maud, maybe about 5 bedrooms in all," she suggested. "Okay then, 5 bedrooms," Prudence submitted. At times like these, Prudence wasn't sure if she should thank Stubbs or not. Was it her place to do so? She knew it would be awkward. All he would say was, "No problem, man, just helping out." And then she would regret having said anything, putting him on the spot like that. What else the man supposed to say? "No problem, Prudence. Just be sure to hand me your firstborn when the time comes." Of course, he would pretend that he didn't mind. But did he? If her father had been here, things wouldn't be this way. Prudence was sure of it. Her father had been a hard-working man, a tiler by trade, who took pride in his work. He paid his bills. Every fortnight, as soon as he got paid, he placed the envelope in Maud's hand. He knew she would take care of business. They would have light right this minute if he was still here, Prudence thought. I'm hot. Wonder if Wayne is back from tutorial, she asked out loud, but to no one in particular. I really need some cool seawater on me. She stretched out in the couch, sweat dripping from her forehead. By 3 o'clock, she could take it no longer. She walked down towards Leroy's house, but met him coming up the pathway. Wayne will meet us there, he said. Mr. Samuels is giving us a ride. We have to hurry up before he leaves. You know how miserable he is. Cheyenne is coming too, my cousin. Don't think you would remember her, Lee. Who? Cheyenne, my cousin. Well, not my real cousin. No prob, said Leroy. They loaded into the back of Mr. Samuel's pickup truck, barely finding space among the supplies. Prudence, Leroy, Cheyenne, Prim, and their neighbor Greg. Mr. Samuels owned one of the gazebo-style restaurants along the beach, which sold fish, bami, and festival. He was a grim-faced critter who hardly ever spoke and smiled even less. Luckily for his business, his wife was as pleasant and as chirpy as wives go. The business prospered, mostly because Mr. Samuels took the back seat to her. Hellshire Beach was the most popular beach along the south coast of Portmore, famous for freshly caught fish, escovitch, and served with festival and bami. A short ride westward from Greater Portmore, the Hellshire Hills were covered with near-desert shrubs and was home to iguanas, conies, mongooses, and rare birds, perhaps a few yellow snakes. The swamps teemed with American crocodiles, who floated down into the housing scheme during the wet season. First settled by the Tainos, the Hellshire region was home to various fauna that were mainly elusive, an impressive system of caves and cacti reminiscent of a Mexican desert. But Hellshire was most famous for its beach. Like any other Saturday, the beach was crowded. People came from as far away as Kingston and even further afield to wash away the stress of the work week that had just passed and gear up for the one that was approaching. Some only wanted to soak up some sun. They lay on blankets or benches, suntan oil oozing from their pores, sunglasses firmly fixed over their closed eyes, perhaps a straw hat to complete the tourist effect. Their children played about with balls or shovels, piling sand on top of each other, going for horseback rides. Others bobbed near the water's edge on old car tires or rubber floats. Others still wandered further at sea, out towards the deep where they were warned not to go. Many had drowned along this stretch of beach. The coast was rocky and unpredictable, at times dipping without warning over a steep underwater crag. The current often came in powerful and unrelenting. You had to know what you were doing or you'd be quickly carried under. Alright, I'll continue this chapter in the next video. So I'll sign off for here. I'll continue this chapter. Say goodbye.